Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Philippe Humeau, CEO and co-founder of CrowdSec. Philippe, thanks so much for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk today.
Hi, Terry. Very flattered to be here.
Appreciate you doing this. We, of course, are talking about the network effect, but before we go there, tell us a bit about the state of the current threat landscape. What do you see as some of the big issues that are arising there?
Yeah, I think everybody is around like defensive AIs and how to leverage AI in a defensive context. What we forget also is that the bad guys are also using AI. We see the tip of the iceberg, like the guys are crafting emails and so on that are better than ever before, but it's not the point. They are missing the big point here. The major invisible part of the iceberg is there are offensive autonomous AIs being trained as we speak by governments and private corporations alike. And what they do is they use the logs of the servers, the huge database of exploits, the explanations, and also the CTF, the capture the flag games, to see how the guys are doing it. And now we have offensive AIs that will be extremely efficient at penetrating any network or companies in milliseconds, using all the arsenal they can leverage. So this is, I think, to me, the highest threat in the landscape that will unfold probably in a year from now. But that is very, very important for me.
Sure. So to bring the network effect idea in here, which states that the more people who use, in this case, a network, the more value they both bring and derive from it. How does the network effect idea factor into the threat landscape?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we speak about the Metcalfe law here. So every new user adds exponentially more value to an existing network, multiplying its efficiency. So what we see as a good defensive strategy at CrowdSec is the crowd part. So the larger a network is, the more efficient it becomes. And yes, at some point, every member of the network will start reporting the same thing, but it's not a bad thing per se. It's not because you're going to get new visibilities that it's unusable. The more people report the same thing, the lower the timing becomes before you actually land this IP into a block list. So when 1,000 people are reporting an IP, it could take an hour for it to get into a global block list. When 1 million people report the same IP, it could take seconds or hours. So it's all about being more efficient.
Okay. Let's change gears slightly and talk about cybercrime over IPv6. It's kind of shocking that that's actually a thing. Wasn't IPv6 supposed to keep everybody safe from these kinds of things?
Yeah, and funny enough, Terry, like my teacher back in my school years, it's like 25 years ago, if I'm honest with myself, he was telling me like IPv6 is a beacon, it's coming up, so you have to be ready, guys, for that. 20 years in, we still are waiting for IPv6 to be a real thing. Now, what we see as a major movement is IPv6 is here. And I can tell you this not because of telco operators or whatever. I can tell you this because the bad guys are leveraging them. What we see in our global database, and we speak tens of millions of reports per day, right? What we see is in October 2022, with 10% of the IPs that were dangerous that were IPv6, only 10%. Nowadays, today as we speak, it's 20%. Okay. So it's a 100% rise in what, 8 months? So IPv6 attacks are on the rise, and I'm not sure everyone is prepared for that. So it's really important that people consider now IPv6 as a real source of potential threats and deal with them properly. If you're not ready with your firewall, if you're not ready with your appliances, get ready now, because they are.
What is the origin of these attacks? Are we talking about cloud providers' IP addresses, providers that fail to ban malicious IP addresses, something else?
Well, it's a very interesting question here, because we used to think that most of the attacks would come from VPNs and residential proxies and things alike. Actually, the reality is just 5% of them are initiated, the attacks are initiated from VPN and residential proxies addresses. So the other one that we see are not so much or less and less cloud providers like Amazon, GCP, and so on, because now you have to pay to get those public IP addresses, which was not the case back in the day. So if you have to spend money on a VPN, spend money on AWS or whatever to get your public IP, you're less likely to use them because you don't want to use a credit card, obviously. They don't get Bitcoin, they don't collect Bitcoin, so you cannot really pay with cryptocurrency. And they already have a herd of machines already compromised that have public IP addresses. So what they do is they usually use IPs that are in the range of an ISP or a provider, and they compromise a few machines or they rent them on the dark net, and they are using those IPs for as long as they can. Hence, the good thing is to burn those IP addresses as fast as we can using the network effect. That's how it becomes effective.
Okay. All right. But individual IP addresses can't be ignored or blocked?
No, they cannot be ignored. We have to be very careful with those because they fall under the GDPR law regulation.
Okay.
Because it's a personal data, right? So if your IP is part of the business, it's not personal data. If it's your IP at home, it's a personal data as per the GDPR. So we have to be careful. But we cannot ignore threat that comes from an individual IP because it's individual, right? We still have to protect ourselves. So the European regulatory bodies thought that the Chapter 49 would help in saying, if you are dealing with these private IP addresses in the context of protecting cybersecurity environments, then you're allowed to handle those IPs with all the necessary cautions, but you're allowed to handle them, blacklist them, and so on, for as long as they are dangerous. Because maybe, I don't know, your grandma got her machine compromised. She doesn't know about it. We don't finger point her. Sure. We just don't want our machine to be a threat to businesses or other individuals. So that's how we deal with this.
How are you seeing attackers repurpose VPNs and Tor in these instances? How quickly are they able to rotate IP addresses?
So that's an extremely good question. I think for what we see for now is like 5% of the block list we are commonly constructing with 250,000 installs in the world. This block list rotates 5% per day. So one could think it's a lot, one could think it's few. The actual reality at scale is that 5% of the IP addresses are changing on a daily basis.
So how is it that you see the network effect as a useful model for addressing all these challenges?
Well, when you're a cyber criminal, you cannot think that changing your IP address, repurposing them, moving your ops from here to there is for free. Whether it's time, whether it's money, it's costing you something. The network effect kicks in by burning those resources, either time or money. You need to change and rotate constantly your IP addresses because after a few aggressions, you blacklisted by the global network of users. That's where the crowd kicks in. So it's increasing the cost of attack, the cost of maintaining those attacks by a tenfold factor, meaning it's easier for those guys to switch target, but then, they will probably fall on another client using the same block list. So, little by little with this network effect, we are actually choking their operations by killing their most precious resource, IP addresses.
I mean, this sounds less like a network and more like a roulette wheel on steroids or something.
Yeah, we like to call ourselves like some kind of Waze of firewalls, if I can use this, comparison, because Waze use three things to actually help you on the road: your position, your vehicle, your speed, and your heading, right? We use exact three also parameters, like the timestamp of when you were attacked, the IP address that aggressed you, and the behavior it unfolded. And with just those three factors, amplified by 250,000 installs, we can tell this IP address has been seen here and here and here. And for now, it's compromised. And when it won't be reported anymore by the community, then we'll release it. Because it's equally as important to add a new IP address into a block list than to remove one, because you want to trigger false positive or be poisoned.
Okay, well, I'll never use my VPN again with quite the same confidence, but thanks all the same, Philippe. Thanks for joining us on News Desk today.
Thank you, Terry.
We've been talking with Philippe Humeau, CEO and co-founder of CrowdSec. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll be right back.